I'm going to kick us off. This is our 13.11 release kickoff, milestone kickoff. So first up is Kristen, PM for product planning.
Hi there. All right, so I'm going to take everyone through what we're kicking off in 13.11. I'm just going to share my screen here and look at our planning issue while I talk. So on the product planning team, we do have a fairly small capacity for 13.11. We're working with 12 to 17 points. So we want to really make sure we spend it in the right spot. Our focus is fully on our Epic boards rollout. Last Monday, we did a kickoff on our MVC2 for Epic boards, and you could see here, that's our main focus. It's around 10 points left. That is spread into from 13.10 and 13.11. But we're putting all of our efforts behind that and continuing to drive that forward. We also have a few other smaller issues that we're going to look at. One is our Epic aggregate tracking issue, which is essentially, this is going to get us to tracking parity with issues. So you can see the team has already merged lots of MRs for all of the different Epic actions. And so this will continue to be a focus in 13.11 and hopefully ship in 13.11. And with this data, we'll be able to make better customer decisions. We'll also be able to see how epics relate in comparison to issues in plan. The last two that I'm going to mention are their usability and dogfooding issues. And one of them we discovered on actually a team call when we did the kickoff for MVC2. And that is that it's frustrating when you drag and drop in epics. And if you drag one epic over another, it will open up and you won't be able to just drag over it. So currently there isn't a delay on epics. And that is what this issue is going to address. So you'll have to hover for a given amount of time and then it will open. I've also marked that one dogfooding because we did find that as a team and it's really important. And then the last one is this improving the loading state of boards when swim lanes are applied. So this is another dogfooding issue that the team found. And actually, Mark and I found this morning on a call. But what currently happens with boards is if you have a lot of cards, it can be in the loading state for a long time. And you're not knowing that that's happening. So you're looking at your board, you see all the cards there, and you try to interact with it or maybe click on one of the cards and then nothing happens. And what's happening is behind the scenes, it's still loading, but there's no indicator to you as the user that that's happening. So what this proposal and MVC is going to do is add skeleton loaders to the boards. And you could see here just full screen kind of what that looks like. Essentially, it's going to be a major indication that it's still in a loading state while still giving the user this feedback that they do have columns and cards and things like that on the board. And then once all the objects are loaded, it would progress and you'd see them and be able to interact with them. That's it for the product planning team. Are there any questions about that?
I have a couple. Yeah. Thank you, Kristen, first of all, for walking us. Excited. So for Epic boards, I know this Epic boards themselves aren't a category. Epics are a category, but if you were to treat them as a category for a second, for my fictitious example, when would you say that Epic boards would be viable? Is that after MVC2 or would that be after MVC3?
Definitely after MVC3, because that gets us to base level parity with issue boards. And we could go a lot more beyond that for a completion. But viable would be all of the base level CRUD actions, dragging and dropping and things like that.
Got it. Okay.
Good question.
My second question is related to that, which is at what point do you plan to make Epic boards GA or generally available? So I know, if I understand correctly, still after 13.10, you'll have to do some configuration and a feature flag on.
Yes.
But when will that be generally available for anyone who's running GitLab?
So we're targeting 14.0 for that to happen. And we will have got a lot of the bugs out because it's behind feature flags for MVC2. We're going to be doing a lot more testing. It may be 14.1, but the goal is 14.0. And we will pull the feature flag then so everyone will get it.
Awesome. That's great. And then last question for me, at least, skeleton loaders. That's great. It's a great quality of life improvement. I agree that it's just using it this morning and forgot there's still loading, and I was mashing the refresh button trying to figure out why. And I realized it was just loading a giant board. Will there be animation on the skeleton loaders, or will it just be the like ghosted frame of the list?
Yeah, so if we look at the issue, we're going to start with the ghosted frame. I should have mentioned this. So we'll start with just solid, which isn't as fun, but it still gives the indication. And then future scope, we're going to break off other one. You can see here, if I click this, it's got a little more animation to it. There's different ways the team is playing. But for our first 2-pointer, just get something up. It's just going to be the image.
Great. It's all from me.
Looks like Gabe is next.
Cool. Let's do this. All right. So my capacity, we'll talk about that real quick. Running velocity is about 30 weight. Right now I have 51 in the milestone. But before you fret, don't worry. This is sort of intentional a little bit. Some of these things are in kind of different flights, but at a very high level, we're working on playing work with iterations. Again, like this is one of the primary use cases for the team experience within GitLab. And it's basically taking what would be those epics and breaking them down into smaller pieces, user stories, individual vertical feature slices, and then sequencing those out across any number of upcoming iterations. So what we're doing right now is making progress on supporting multiple iteration cadences. The need with this one is basically around the fact that there are lots of teams that all work within the same group or sets of groups or subgroups, and they all want to have their own kind of iterations and iteration cadences, their own sort of reporting. GitLab's a great example where all of our product teams work in basically a single group. Some of them want their own, like, want to run 2-week iterations, some want others. We've kind of been making progress on the back end, and we have the front end kind of UI now mocked up pretty well. And so what we've done is broken this down into a very small vertical feature slices, literally that map to user actions. So we're not expecting to get this done in 13.11, but we are going to just make progress through each of these. So they can be their own MRs if they want. They could be grouped into MRs. I really have left that up to the engineers on how they want to tackle this from development standpoint. But this will also then enable us to do automated iteration cadences where you can schedule, basically enable automated scheduling, pick a start date that you want to start your iteration cadence on, which would be the first day of your first iteration, the duration in weeks. If you automatically roll your issues over from one done iteration to the next, and then how many future iterations you want GitLab to maintain for you. So pretty much all of the CRUD and the management of iterations themselves can be fully automated. Once this is in place, it will enable us to then move on to adding velocity, which is kind of the last big thing within this kind of iterations work stream that we have planned at the moment. So again, it's 22 points represents all of that, but we're just going to try to chunk down and get a little bit as much done as we can, while we're also respecting some of the other things that we need to work on. Extensible issues is another theme. This is sort of makes it along the lines of GitLab needs to be a little bit more configurable with same defaults, of course. So one of the small things we're going to be doing within this work stream is filtering issues by issue type and issue boards and lists. So right now, this is sort of a higher priority because incidents are also backed by a type of issue. More and more feedback we're getting through that channel is basically suggesting that there needs to be better filtering and sorting of incidents that are intermingled with issues on board. So you can filter by just type of incident and get better visibility there. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And then we're going to take our first step towards adding customizable issue types to the product by adding support for default issue types. So these will eventually be able to be customized by the end user. They will be able to add more, but this is basically a small front end change that maps to the back end work necessary to kind of move the issue types into its own model and be able to support the future needs there. So there's not a ton of UX, but what will happen as a result of this is each of these types of issues will have their own little icon. You can create a new type of issue from the issue dropdown currently, but these will then become available. And then in future iterations, end users will be able to customize those types and add their own. So that's that small thing. And then in the last sort of big work stream, I call it quality of life, and that includes performance refinements, application limits, for dev stuff, security, usability. Based on Noop's announcement today that we need to prioritize InfraDev over pretty much everything else. All of the open InfraDev issues in plan have been scheduled for 13.11 and take precedence over anything else that I said previously in the 2 work streams. But thankfully, 3 out of the 4 we were already pretty far along with. And that would be improving performance of projects listed under API and load into the next tier, which is reference architectures. We need to kind of clean up some of the performance there. I think when we get up into like, which tier is it? A lot of users. I can't remember the reference architecture we're trying to target, but we basically need to improve the project listed API for that. Add application limits for Jira imports. Right now, there is no limits whatsoever. So you basically can crash Redis by stashing a bunch of Redis keys when you're doing a massive import. And so we're going to kind of take an approach to adding some limits there. Then this is something we've been planning to do for a long time. So it kind of fits nicely into Noop's priorities. We also are going to make progress on delayed deletion for projects by default. Heinrich's been working on this for a while. So hopefully we'll be able to get it finished up, but more or less what this will do is it enable us to enable soft deletion or basically delayed deletion on GitLab.com by default. Right now, there's not an option for people to be able to enable or disable it. And so some people were really upset and didn't like the fact that we deleted by default their projects. They wanted to hard delete it. Others were upset that they couldn't configure the time period. And so we kind of disabled it by default, but that put a bunch of load onto InfraDev because if there is a group that gets deleted by accident or by feature bug, they're on the hook for restoring it. So we're going to add some safety controls around that to make sure that we can basically support both camps as well as InfraDev. Another thing we've been working on is using TCP connections between successive mailer jobs. Sounds boring, but basically a high port demand from our mail queues, and that has actually caused an incident today. Heinrich has been working on this for a while as well, so hopefully we'll get that wrapped up. And then there's a couple small performance things for the project's issues controller, and then one bug for fixing incorrect number of issues in fixed burn down charts so that there is more accurate reporting and it's not wonky. So that's it for me.
Awesome, thanks. I had a couple questions. I'm going to challenge your 50 points because you brought it up.
Yeah.
I'll do it this way. For iterations, what would you say would be the one smallest thing that you'd like to see the team accomplish in 13.11? I'm supportive of the longer term project and let's make progress on it. Great. But if you could pick one thing, what would you want the team to focus on delivering?
It would be, I think the thing that we're going to be doing first is basically making it so that there are iteration cadences and a single iteration cadence on the back end. So there's not even front end changes, and that's going to fix a number of bugs. And so that would be the one thing. I think it's might already be done or close to done. And then the next thing that I would like to do is being able to create a new cadence and just enter the name for that cadence and not anything else, and then see my iterations within that. So those are the two smallest things that I think we can get done this release.
Great. And I have the same question for extensible issues.
Yep. That would be the smallest thing that I want us to get done is adding support for default issue types. It doesn't require any additional front-end development. We already have the drop down in the issue create form where you can select which type it is. So I would like to have the backend basically table done and then have those default types show up in the drop down. That's it. So that's what we're planning on doing.
Awesome. Great. Last thing I had here was just a thank you for prioritizing, I can say that word, the InfraDev work. I know it's not feature work, it's not glamorous necessarily, but it's critical from a customer support and just customer satisfaction perspective. It helps us run GitLab.com more efficiently and is good for the business. So thanks.
Yeah, my pleasure.
I just want to +1 that as well and ask too, if we could give any capacity to that. We're happy to help. I didn't see any under group product planning when I looked at the infra dev query, but we could help jump on some of those, the plan ones.
Thanks. I'll talk to and let's talk to engineering managers, and things like this generally always will fall to my team, because if you look at the features.yaml, we have all the random stray features in the product basically get stuffed under our group, so that naturally get assigned to us. So thanks for offering, and I'll take you up on it.
Cool. All right, Mark.
Excellent. So just go through the Certify kickoff here as well. As we're sharing capacity with Kristen, we have our total capacity of around 5 this release. So there's a lot of work that's being carried over. Mostly bug fixes is what's left, which is actually good news. The core theme for the remainder of fiscal year 21 and into fiscal year 22 is to build requirements management and quality management into an integrated and unified solution to our customer. We're looking to have a single solution to requirements, test cases, and verification efforts for the team. So our first initiative toward that is to link test cases to requirements. I linked the epic there. There's about 5 points of weight this release we expect to send toward that, which is the entirety of the capacity for those keeping track. But this initiative should bring all the benefits of issues to requirements. We'll be able to have labels in a more consistent manner. We'll be able to look at requirements and link them to other things throughout GitLab using the existing construct. So that's really exciting. So there's 2 issues there. The first one is to add a new issue type for requirements. And the second is add the model restrictions for requirements issue types, because we don't want to take everything from issues into requirements. So there's going to be some restrictions on what we do and do not allow into the issues or into the requirements from issues. Since that does maintain the bulk of our capacity, there are 2 bugs and quality of life improvements that I've scheduled. One of them is a weight of 2. It's actually mostly done, which is why I felt comfortable putting it in this release as well. The other is a priority 2, severity 2 bug, and bugs don't generally count toward our weight. In fact, they generally, the engineering team has generally been completing 4 to 10 bugs per release in addition to the weight they've been doing. So this is the bug for the quality management, or for the service desk this month, as well as there's 1 security fix. So that's what we're planned for 13.11. Any questions?
I had one just to clarify. So because you're going to reuse the primitive issues, the way I relate one issue to another issue today is sort of the same mechanism you're going to use to relate a test case to a requirement. Is that the way I understand it?
We're looking to leverage that mechanism, yes. Since that's already been built into the issue types, there's no point in reinventing it for requirements as it stands now as a standalone. So what we're looking to do is leverage that. We have not made a final decision if we will use the actual related to as we have it today, or if we'll use a field of similar capacity or add to that related field. But the idea behind it is the same. So yes, that's our plan.
And one thing I could add to that, I just linked in the agenda. Basically, there's another issue that is on our near-term roadmap for improving and evolving how relationships work. Basically, right now, there are lots of other teams that want to relate things to issues. Issues need a more formal relationship to merge requests. Threat Insights wants to basically show related vulnerabilities on an issue itself. And so like what we've kind of done is gotten ourselves to where like the current approach of just like linking something and relating it is not as expressive as we need. So for example, for like a requirement, it would be like almost like a parent of issues, right? Or like basically being able to find related blocking and parent-child relationships in a more clear way that also doesn't take up the entire view when you have like 11 different types of objects all related to an issue, which is what's going to happen soon. So it's going to be a fun challenge to solve.
And that's why we haven't committed to how we're going to do that, because we knew there were some other initiatives out there where we're trying to redefine that relationship a little bit. But the idea is to extend that into requirements in a sane manner so it's not overwhelming to our users.
Cool. One last question for me, at least. I was just thinking about this. So we have this mechanism of satisfying a requirement, right? Is there a way that we bring that functionality back into the sort of primitive issue type, and could it be reused in some way across another feature or another issue type on that longer term issue types roadmap?
Yes, because actually what it's doing is there's a report type defined in our CSD pipelines right now. And when you run that specific type of report, it looks for specific text in a JSON file passed into it, and then marks those related requirements as satisfied or failed. And because the requirement IDs will be part of the issue ID structure going forward when we do the transition, there's no reason we could not expand that. Though to start with that, I don't think that's on the requirements team currently to expand it, but I think other teams could then utilize that or leverage that. So for like instance, you could have closed instance or you could link incidents to requirements. I think the goal long-term, though, we need to make sure the paradigm is clear. If an incident results in a problem, should then that result in a requirement update, and then you satisfy the requirement again? In theory, your requirement should be central to your development. So any problems you find should actually result in a requirement change, which then results in the change and the satisfaction of the requirement. But we need to work through those use cases.
So that was kind of where my head was going. So glad you guys thought about it. All right. Any other questions from the rest of the group? All right. Well, thanks for watching, everyone, and good luck and have a great 13.11 milestone.